Okay, so good afternoon. I believe we are live. I'll wait a few minutes for people to log on. If you're just joining us, it is a little late. We're 4:03 in the afternoon on Tuesday, December 3rd. And just looking through headlines and some of the topics for today, and definitely want to talk about affordable housing. A very good article in the Connecticut Mirror on what's happening in Woodbridge. Okay. All right. Thanks for joining. I'm Steve Mazzacane. This is the Steve Mazzacane podcast. It is 4:03 on December 3rd. And I want to say thank you for all the messages coming in. And we're getting a bunch of messages saying people like to listen in their car. Just don't watch. Put the phone down, put it on speakerphone. If you're listening now, don't watch. I just assume not be responsible for any car accidents. But I appreciate it. And the kind words are good. And the support is excellent. And as always, if there are questions or comments or issues you want us to talk about, or me to talk about, or research and then talk about, just email it to me. Let me know. Most people have my text. Email, let me know who you are, and I'd be glad to take a look at things. We did get some questions. Some of these are kind of contrived with, some of the group in Branford that is just throwing dirt at the wall of cases. And we've looked into so many of these past issues with Costco and zoning and legal issues and what have you. And where we see merits in these issues, we'll talk about them. Where we don't see merits, where there's clearly just nonsense arguments, we won't talk about them. And you can usually tell what the nonsense arguments are when they're not presenting any evidence with their claims. They say, we need to study into this. Well, why? Well, because we need to study into this because this is corrupt. We need to study into this. You know what? Give me some evidence to support those, and I'd be glad to look into it in a little more detail. I can't respond to, we need to study to look at X without any sort of evidence. We did talk about last week this idea of a study to plan on what should go on the Tabor property. Very much against that. That makes no sense. How Tabor is being handled in Branford makes sense currently. You have very passive recreation. You have town functions on there. You do not have heavy traffic. You do not have car traffic. And that's what most people want. Kathy, Senator Wang had a great Zoom meeting about affordable housing this week. I did not see it. I will take a look at that afterwards. I do want to talk about Woodbridge and what's happening there. And so a large part of this is, corporations that are either for-profit or nonprofit that makes money. The fact that something is a nonprofit in many cases is not relevant. The heads of these nonprofit make a fortune. People involved with it make a fortune. These nonprofits can be an arm that push for advocacy while they're helping some large corporation behind them make a lot of money. And we see that here. The Branford Housing Authority, which is not a town department, state organization, partners with Yale and Yale's legal team to push for Beacon to be able to develop Parkside under this guise of helping people. They're not helping anybody. Now, we talked yesterday how nonsensical this is. But something interesting came up in the Woodbridge case. For some reason, my throat is killing me today. By the way, can everybody hear me? Just make sure. Yesterday, the volume wasn't coming through right. Some people were getting a little blurry, but I'm hoping that everyone can hear me. But if you haven't read this article in the Connecticut Mirror, not the Connecticut Mirror, I'm sorry, in the New Haven Independent on Woodbridge zoning. And there's this debate over changing Woodbridge's zoning laws to allow for multifamily housing. Woodbridge is, most people know, single-family homes on large lots of land. And it's a wealthier area, and it's surrounded by areas that may not be as wealthy, like New Haven and West Haven and things of that nature. And Yale and some other nonprofits have now made it a target. So first of all, we have to realize this, okay? Yale is no longer a law school. Yale is liberal advocacy school. They're not teaching law. They're teaching their students to fight towns and they tie it with racism. It's about racism. It's all about racism. It's about economics, period. And here's the argument. The argument is that if you keep your housing only expensive housing, if we only have Pine Orchard, and we only have, we're using Branford as an example, we only have 1 acre zoning. You can have one house per 1 acre. then people who do not make a lot of money cannot live there. Therefore, that's racist, because many minorities don't make as much money as whites. Except you test that theory and you say, if you remove racism from it, would it still be true? And the fact of the matter is, if there was no black people on the planet and they were all white people, Pine Orchard would still have zoning that was less units per acre than everywhere else. Woodbridge would still have zoning that was less units per acre than everywhere else. That's what they've built. They built a community that wealthier people go. Period. The argument still stands on economics. If you remove economics, you have nothing. If you remove the race argument, it still exists. It still stands. Therefore, it's not a race argument. And Yale is working overtime, and these groups are working overtime to make it about race. It's not. They are race baiting. That's what's happening here. And it's nonsense. And the problem with doing this is you do a disservice to the arguments of all the racial issues we do face. Are there racial issues? Yes. Of course there are. And you also do a tremendous disservice to helping people get up out of economic situations that should be improved. So we're saying, wait a minute, instead of helping them get educated, and this is white, black, whatever race, people of lower economic means, lower access, instead of helping them get educated, like we do with free education, and most of the students going to Gateway are paying nothing. We give them transportation in many times. We subsidize housing in certain areas. There's so many things we can do that people can take advantage of. We can feed more into those social nets and push them up a little more if possible. Or we can say, you know what, let's take them of lower economic means, throw them in an area of higher economic means, and hope they survive. That's what it'll take. That if people from Fairhaven lived in Brantford, they would miraculously do better. Doesn't work that way. And making it about race is nonsense. And we hear it constantly. This article is actually spectacular because that's what Woodbridge finally came out and said. Woodbridge is a left-leaning town, by the way, a liberal-leaning town. And people came out and said, this is nonsense. They're trying to get zoning changes. They're going to tie up this town in court forever because that's what this group does. And these are students that are being used by teachers and professors to push this agenda. And then the student is just going to go away to whatever state they came from. And on their resume, it's going to say, I fought this town and I got this done. They don't care. It's just resume building to them. And they're doing in these corporations that are going to end up with millions of dollars in state subsidies and federal subsidies to build these units, and then millions of dollars in profit for forever get to use nonprofit legal aid to get their stuff done. We are reaching full crazy with this affordable housing crap. And there's going to be a tipping point. There will be a tipping point where towns, even left-leaning towns, are going to say, come on, give me a break. And towns like Brantford and towns like Woodbridge are targets because in order to do the calculation for that median income, they look at neighboring towns. Sounds much better. Thanks, by the way, the sound is much better. I'm putting it directly in front of me, so hopefully that helps. And Ray Ingraham told me I closed the blinds next to me, and he was wondering if the volume wasn't bouncing off the windows a little bit. So I hope that's a little bit better. But when you have a town that is surrounded by some wealthier towns, Woodbridge, maybe Orange, Brantford has Guilford and Madison. When you do the calculations, the radius, in order to look at the median income, you're looking at a square mileage radius. Well, if you're in the middle of East Haven and you're doing a 2 square mile radius, your median income is not going to be that high. So the rents you can charge aren't going to be that high. But if you're a developer, you want higher rents, even if it's still called affordable housing. So if you put affordable housing in the middle of Greenwich, which is next to, the average income of the 3 or 4 towns around Greenwich is what? $250,000 a year? Then you can have rents that are affordable housing for $3,000, $4,000. People that are making, 40% of the median income are still making $80,000 or $100,000 a year. So those towns become targets. And then we flip that around and say, well, wait a minute, we're trying to get inner city people to go to these other towns. That's not what's happening. Beacon wants to get as much as they can for rent. So there's strategic towns they can go after. And Brantford, in fact, is a perfect person to go out, especially Indian Neck. Indian Neck's amazing because Indian Neck, the average income in Indian Neck is nowhere near what it is in Pine Orchard, but the calculation includes Pine Orchard, includes Guilford. So they can show a higher median income for the area, but the median income for Indian Neck is actually significantly lower than that. And then they do the same thing. If you're not for this project, you're racist. You hate people. You hate minorities. Someone made a very good, interesting point in Woodbridge that they came in and this is racist, and something like 15 to 20% of their population is Asian American. Like, how is it that a town that is so racist ends up with 15, 20% Asian or 25% foreign-born people? Because it's not about race. It's bullshit. And what has to happen are Democrats have to stand up and start saying, we're not going to be race baited anymore. We're not going to let large corporations come in, and we include Yale in large corporations, by the way, with the billions in endowment they have, and use those resources to go to towns like Brantford or Woodbridge or Milford and say, you're racist if you don't put my units up. Period. You want to give people of less economic means a chance? Social safety net, get it. I got it. I'm with you. Free education for people making less than $40,000 a year, $50,000 a year, fine, no problem. Work out babysitting for people of lower economic means so they can go to work, so they can go to school. I'm with you. We fund that. Take them and move them to a wealthier area? What? How does that make any sense? And I hate to break it to you, but you can move all the people in the world to down in Indian Neck. There's no bus service in Indian Neck. None of that exists. Most of Woodbridge doesn't have bus service. There's no public transportation down all those back roads. So if you were to change zoning and have apartments at the end of some cul-de-sac in Woodbridge, you'd be 2 miles from anywhere. How does that help? We're complaining that people are bunched up in the cities. Yeah, because they're near transportation lines. People want it to be near transportation lines. How does moving them away from that work? But Yale tends to forget that. They'll put out a report saying affordable housing should be near transportation lines and then fight for affordable housing in Parkside and Indian Neck. There's no public transportation. They have no problem contradicting their own arguments and then tell you you're racist. It's absurd. It's crazy. It's not stopping. If you haven't read this article, go back and read it. There's a few quotes in here. And the New Haven Independent tends to be left-leaning. But in general, I think when it comes to this, they've kind of been they give both sides. Median home value of the town is over $400,000 in comparison to $230,000 for New Haven County. The town's median income is over $142,000 compared to $68,000 for South Central Connecticut. So basically, the median income of Woodbridge is double that of Brantford. Does a town have an obligation to have a certain percentage of minorities as a rule? I don't see how. And the argument by Yale is, well, because these houses are so expensive, therefore it's segregated because you're not allowing people of lesser means, and people of lesser means tend to be more minorities. So let's go back and look at this and what the negative impact would be on a town like Woodbridge or a town like Brantford. We pay for all of our services with property tax. We pay for our police and for our fire. We pay for schools with our property tax. Much of that tax base comes from houses in Brantford along the shoreline, which are, in some cases, tied in, but very expensive homes for the most part, right? These are not your $300,000 homes. These are your $700,000, $800,000 homes and going up to $2, $3, $4 million homes. Woodbridge, their tax base comes from those homes. Greenwich, the tax base comes from those homes. Those homes, being spaced as they are, give some benefit to the actual amount of needs that town has, right? So if you have, in 4 acres, 2 houses, your demand on fire, your demand on police, the amount of cops you have to have, the amount of firefighters you have to have, the amount of town workers you have to have, is less. If in those same 4 acres you have a 4-story building with 40 units in it, the demand on police, the demand on fire, the demand on all those things is less, is increased. So by having more people go in that town, you increase it. But by increasing density, you can decrease the value of some of the homes. So what happens to the mill rate? When your grand list and the value of the homes drops, the mill rate has to increase for the same amount of services. But you have more density, so you have an increase in services. So not only are you increasing to make up the difference in the drop in the grand list, you're increasing the taxes now to make up for the difference in the demand that's going to be on those services. You have to increase the size of your police department, the size of your fire department, more fire trucks, more water service, emergency water service in certain areas, more maintenance as the use of those roads increases, more public works. All of those expenses go up. And that keeps going, and that keeps going, and that keeps going, and that keeps going. The math argument doesn't make sense. It's just wrong. It's nonsense. It is amazing to sitting through those Parkside hearings. You had the people who had no concept of math, of taxes, of what actually happens in a town giving testimony because it was all emotional testimony. We're racist if we don't support this. We're racist if we don't agree with Yale and their advocacy groups. We're racist if we're not for a Boston-based development company coming in here, getting $23 million in federal grants, and then building this thing. And what we need to see happen are Democratic leaders fight back against this. Republicans are. No question. But in Brantford, that means the Sean Scanlons of the world and Christine Cohen's of the world and Robin Comey's of the world need to start saying, listen, let's not use race baiting as a political ploy anymore. Let's make that promise to ourselves. There are economic issues that we have to address. There are people that need a step up. There are people that we can give help to. I'm someone who would be for education and state colleges and gateways and UConn for people making less than 40 or 50, whatever the number is that we decide on, getting free education or significantly decreased education. Even paying to go to Gateway is not cost prohibitive. I know I did it. And I think I had student loans, I think it was $164 a month. It's not the end of the world. Somebody telling you they can't afford college, it's hard to take. Now, if someone with a child saying they can't afford college, okay, so let's provide some sort of daycare. Let's make that better. Let's subsidize that more. The $23 million, instead of going to Parkside, put that towards daycare. Help those people find daycare for their kids. Let them go to work, get better jobs, work harder, save more. It's what everybody else has to do. Instead, we're making every issue that's an economic issue about race. And they also, if you argue against it, you're an idiot, right? This isn't race, this is, oh man, you're covering up. You're a fool. You're not seeing what we're seeing. You're ignorant of the facts. You don't know history. No, it's economics. And Brantford is stuck in the middle of this crap. And now Milford was stuck in the middle of this crap. Woodbridge is stuck in the middle of this crap. And behind all of them are corporations, developers, trying to make money by coming in and abusing these laws. Every time a law passes, lawyers get excited because the first thing they're going to do is say, how do we make money off of this? COVID's an example of that. That's why in these stimulus packages that are being discussed, one of the big sticking points is legal coverage for businesses, because there are 1 million attorneys right now who are lining up to say, what restaurant could we sue? And even worse, what town could we sue? Who got COVID while they were on the town green? Who got COVID at a town department? Because towns have insurance and they'll pay out. And that means your taxes will go up. But there are lawyers, that's what they do. There are developers and there are lawyers and there are builders that said, let's get an affordable housing law passed. We don't care how bad it is. Our job is to use that law to our advantage. And that's what's happening. And Yale, which is no longer a law school, is an advocacy school. That's what they're doing. They're pushing this nonsense. These kids get a little thing on their resume to walk away. I fought this. I fought this cause. You didn't fight anything. You sold a pile of crap, magic beans that did nothing. You completely have no understanding of economics and how it works. And I'm someone who very much supports the social safety net. I support giving those people a step up. I support giving them a path to be able to afford a house in Woodbridge. I support giving them a path to be able to get an education and work harder to afford a house in Pine Orchard. I live in Indiana Neck. There's a reason I don't live in Pine Orchard. Can't afford it. There are Pine Orchard people. There's a reason they don't live in Greenwich. Can't afford it. They can work towards it. That's something they can do. Our social safety net should exist to help those people of all races move ahead, get higher, get off of state aid in the social safety net that they're depending on. That's what it should do. Educate, get health care, get food, make sure they have a roof over their head. To get a better roof over their head, that's their effort. The tools are there. This affordable housing nonsense has got to stop. And it will only stop when Democrats are the ones that say, I've had enough. When Democratic leaders are the ones that say, I'm not letting our base, the people who vote for us, use race to incite bullshit. I'm not letting corporations come in here and use race to make millions of dollars off those neighborhoods. That's what will have to happen. And I'll tell you something. Lamont kind of is. Lamont has not got down and worshiped these groups. He's a guy with an understanding of economics. We need the other Democrats, the other Democratic leaders to jump on board. Now, talking about that social safety net. So if anybody's questioning whether or not I support the social safety net, that'll be out the window because I very much support as large a stimulus as humanly possible. So we did get good news this afternoon so just a few things happened this afternoon which are interesting. We'll talk about the so the markets were way up today and then they dropped in the last half hour significantly. We'll talk about that in a second. But Pelosi and McConnell had a phone call, and that is, as odd as it is, very, very good news for a stimulus package. Now it looks like House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell spoke Thursday as Congress rushes to strike a coronavirus stimulus deal to avoid a shutdown. The pair talked about their shared commitment to completing an omnibus or a spending bill and COVID relief as soon as possible. Okay. McConnell said he sees hopeful signs for reaching a relief agreement before the end of the year. Pelosi and Schumer backed a bipartisan $908 billion stimulus. So first of all, let's look at it this way. Democrats were like at 3, then at 2.2 trillion. McConnell was at 500 billion. A bipartisan bill came out earlier this week from Republicans and Democrats, lower ranking members of Congress. Now, Pelosi is okay with the $908 billion stimulus package. So if this ends up at $908 billion from the original 3 to $500 billion, McConnell wins. McConnell is winning this. Is this enough of a stimulus to the economy? I don't believe so. Will we need another stimulus? Yes, no question. But it's something. But McConnell's winning. And this is part of the problem with our political system. You allowed one person to hold the system hijacked or hostage, hijack the system for months. And now it's okay. Now we can work together. And you're getting a stimulus much closer to his side than what you had before. But anyway, $908 billion is something. There is bipartisan support for it. So really all you need now is Mitch McConnell to come on board. Pelosi spokesman said in a tweet, they've signaled they want to resolve both thorny issues by December 11th, which is next week, which means now, and what I'm seeing in this stimulus, the $1,200 is not there. Those on unemployment would get $300 more. Look at more details of this. Yeah, at $300 would be money for PPP, so the businesses would get some. And a list came out today on, I believe, the Register, or someone sent it to me, of the money some local businesses got. And some local businesses got quite a bit of money, like hundreds of thousands of dollars for some local restaurants. Now, they may have needed that, and hopefully they were able to use it on payroll and giving people jobs. But a lot of people got a lot of money, but there'll be more of that money, which will help. Some money for states. It would not, according to what's written here, it would be a temporary 2-month reprieve on legal protections for small businesses in the hopes that states would come up with some sort of long-term plan. Now, I'm guessing a state like Connecticut would not come up with a long-term plan. Democrats in general do not want to support that. They want to, they side on labor and not want to support something like that. So what does this mean? If you're unemployed now, this passes next week. It'll take a few weeks to implement. So when it ends, which is at the end of the year, starting January 1st, you likely will have an extra $300 in your check, in your unemployment check. A couple things haven't happened. The self-employed thing, the PUA, needs an extension. That's going to expire, and there is no state extension for that. So the federal government has to act for self-employed people and gig workers. So artists, self-employed, yes, and some of them are doing better. But the gig workers, the artists, musicians, things of that nature, which are, there's no entertainment money happening, they need that extension. So that has to happen. They would get their unemployment extension and the $300. Those on unemployment would get the $300. So $1,200 would not be part of that. And just looking over the details, much of the rest is PPP and some state and town help. So will that help? Yeah. Are we seeing local restaurants, local businesses suffer tremendously? I heard a number today that if this continues into the middle of next year, 40% of small businesses will be gone. I believe that. I believe that. It's real. And that's why it's so disappointing to see such a small stimulus. You know, if you went back to giving people $600 for another 6 months, even 3 or 4 months, it would be a massive boost to those small businesses. But the idea years ago that Walmart would take over and Amazon would take over, that never happened. Small businesses held their own. COVID is what happened. And COVID is what's going to hurry up the transition to these large chains, internet commerce, and really, really kill small businesses. And the government had an opportunity to help them. Had they passed this stimulus a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, a full stimulus, many of these businesses would have been able to survive this winter. As it stands now, many are not. So we're in interesting times. And the belief that you're not helping the people on the lowest level if you're not for affordable housing is nonsense. But to not support the people on those lowest levels with a stimulus in the middle of a pandemic is crazy. And it's unfortunate that, well, we have a government system where one person held this up. I think Trump would have signed anything. If they went to Trump with a $3 million plan before the election, if Trump could have gotten on the podium and said, listen, I just gave everybody $600 more, another $1,200, he would have done that in a heartbeat. Mitch McConnell stopped it. So you're going to have a stopgap measure, depending on what happens in Georgia. And by the way, the Georgia races are tighter than I thought. I believe one of the Democrats might be ahead. So Democrats have to win both, but those are both very, very close. If Democrats win Georgia, they have all branches of government, you will see, in my opinion, a massive stimulus package in early February. If Republicans get it, you probably won't see another one. So anyway, that's me ranting about affordable housing and the stimulus package. But that's the end of our week. So it's 4:30. I want to say thank you for a really good week. We came live 3 times this week. I know we have some new viewers because people are stopping me at Hornet's Nest and at lunch today. At breakfast today. Asking questions and talking about it and what have you. So I am always open to suggestion. If there's something I need to change, if there's a technical issue, if there's a topic you want to talk about, let me know. I've had somebody say I should be less serious. Being serious is about what I'm talking about. If I'm talking about what TV show to watch, I'll be less serious. If I'm talking about affordable housing, I'll be a little more serious. By the way, I did try to watch Sons of Anarchy. I know everybody said that's the show that I should be watching, but it's on Hulu, and I don't have Hulu. So apparently I have to subscribe to Hulu, and I will do that in the next week or two. And as I've promised, I will watch the first few episodes of Sons of Anarchy. So guys, have a great weekend. It's a good Thursday night. It's not too cold outside. Hopefully you can get out, patronize a local restaurant, spend some money in the community, do the same on the weekend. I hope you have a great weekend. I will see you Monday. Have a great night.